The way that I learned the first two jazz standards when I was starting out is almost a perfect example of how to screw up everything that I'm going to talk about in this video. And one of those things is especially tricky, the way that we often practice now. The first two songs that I learned were Stella by Starlight and There's No Greater Love. Both are incredibly beautiful songs. And they're also very common standards, so they're useful to have in your repertoire, but they're not really beginner songs. So it was a lot of hard work to learn them, and maybe I did not get as much out of that as I could have. What I did was that I recorded the chords of the song and spent hours every day improvising over them, gradually finding ways to go from one chord to the next and finding something to play everywhere on the song. With this process, it took me more than 2 months to learn the songs. These two songs were much too difficult. There are so many different chords and chord progressions that you don't really get the opportunity to develop different options. You don't start working on making variations of what you're playing. This really means that you're not developing your ability to improvise, and you're also not really building a flexible vocabulary, which is what you want to do, because then learning more songs gets a lot easier. Stella by Starlight is also a pretty difficult progression to analyze, which means that you end up just playing from chord to chord and not really trying to sound like a real piece of music when you're improvising. So you want to make sure to choose easy songs when you start out. Think about it like this: you'll probably learn a lot of songs while you're learning to play jazz, and you might as well ease into it. If you're looking at a song and you're thinking,
brilliant! I have absolutely no idea what's going on,
then keep looking for another song to learn. Nobody starts training for a marathon by running 42 kilometers. One of the blessings of using apps on your phone is maybe also something that's really slowing you down in learning jazz. Here I'm of course talking about iReal, which is a great, very practical app to have if you have to play a song that you don't know. But there is one really huge problem with it. A song is not a row of letters, and if you focus too much on learning songs with iReal, then you're probably very often ignoring the melody. Keep in mind that the melody is the song. It's really just the chords. And in a lot of songs, then the chords are open to interpretation, and there are many variations available. So if you only know one set of chords and you don't know what other options fit the melody, then you might get in trouble later. So you want to spend time learning the melody, because if you know the melody, you always have something to play in your solos. The melody is a great starting point for a solo, and if there's one spot in the song that's difficult to solo over, just play the melody. If you know the melody, you have a guide so you don't get lost. It is difficult to hear a chord progression in your head, like 1 bar of G half diminished, 1 bar of C7, and then 2 bars of F minor 6. But it's a lot easier to have the melody playing in the back of your mind, because it's a lot less abstract and you can hear how the time moves and how the melody and the harmony then also moves. If you know the melody, it's easier to hear other chord changes because you can hear the melody against those chords. For example, here's the opening of Stella. And if I change the first chord like this, then you can probably hear that the melody is now the major 7th of the chord, so the first chord is now a B flat major 7. A bonus from this is that eventually you want to start learning songs by ear, and the easiest place to start is to learn the melody by ear. Don't worry about the chords, just learn the melody and maybe check out a few different versions. Then you can transcribe the bass and combine those two to figure out what the chords are. I'm actually surprised how often I've run into this. Imagine a student coming into a lesson and we play a song that he or she had to learn. The theme and the solo is okay, but playing the chords is not working at all. Whatever song you play, it really pays off to also learn to hear the harmony and to feel how it is to play that harmony. Not only for you to learn to play that song, but also because you want to play with others. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it should be there. There is one thing that's going to make this a lot easier, and that's what I want to talk about next. Starting to think about chord progressions like this is such a gigantic step up. You can save tons of time and open up your playing really a lot. And this is just doing the same thing as we do whenever we read a book or a newspaper article. Whenever you're reading a sentence, then you read the words, but you don't spell them. You read them as complete words. And that's something you also want to strive to do when you learn a song, or even while you are reading and improvising. Make it into chunks of information that help you play over it. Something you can sum up in a few blocks instead of 30 plus different chords. And actually there is a next level of thinking related to this, where you also start to realize how different chords are actually the same thing. but maybe that's for another video. When it comes to improvising over a song you're still learning, there is one part of the preparation you definitely want to get right. You need to be able to have all the scales and arpeggios that you want to use within reach. It's pretty much impossible to have any kind of melodic continuity or freedom if you need to skip up or down 3 or 4 frets to have something to play over a certain part of the song. And this is probably not something that's impossible to overcome with a bit of practice. And if you're not at home over the entire neck, then pick a place and start there. Once you have one position under control, you can expand from there, taking positions next to it, and in that way, get the entire neck. As you can tell, music theory is a very useful tool for learning songs and learning jazz guitar in general. It's something that you want to use, so check out this video to see a down-to-earth way to get started with theory. It covers some of the basics that you definitely want to know, but also shows you how you relate it to what you're playing and how it helps you learn to play jazz.